welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Hello and welcome to the Skeptic Zone, episode number 249. 249 for the 28th of July 2013. Richard Saunders here with you, back again in Sydney, Australia, and what a wonderful time I had visiting the United States, especially visiting the amazing meeting in Las Vegas. A busy time to be sure, but lots of fun and so interesting. And thank you to all those people who came up to say hello. All those Skeptic Zone fans, I was so pleased and touched to meet you all. It was really great, and more than one person commented on the fact that at the beginning of every episode of the Skeptic Zone, I'm always racing downstairs to grab something to eat or drink. I'm not really sure why that started, but you know what? We'll see if we can continue that tradition. Life is like a box of chocolates, somebody once said, and that's what the Skeptic Zone is like this episode. It's a bit of a mixture, a mixed bag. You never know what you're going to get. Well, I'll tell you what you're getting on this episode of the Skeptic Zone. We're kicking off with our favourite Dr. Rachie Reports. Dr. Rachie Reports looks at some of the ramifications of that TV report and her efforts to get chiropractors to answer a very, very simple question. That's coming up at the top of the show. After that, we have an interview concerning getting more science into the mainstream media. What a worthwhile endeavour. From the website www.andinscience.com, we'll find more about the petition running to get more science into the media. An interview with Rowan from And in Science coming up a little bit later in the show. And after that, it's our good friend Dr. Paul Willis from the Royal Institution of Australia with the fill-in segment all about what's happening in the world of science at the moment. And the good news is, well, the better news, because it's always good to have Paul Willis on the show, the better news is, of course, next week, the full-blown Week in Science returns. As if that wasn't enough, folks, as if that wasn't enough. After that, we have an interview with Ben Radford, the paranormal investigator. And joining Ben halfway through the interview is none other than Brian Dunning, who sort of photobombed, gate crashed, what's the word? The interview I was having with Ben Radford, but it was all in good fun. We were having dinner in Hollywood, and Ben and I stepped aside into a sort of a corridor and were having a chat, and suddenly Brian Dunning appeared. That's all coming up. It's a wide-ranging sort of chat amongst friends. I think you'll enjoy it. And then to round off the show, well, what Skeptic Zone would be complete without Maynard's spooky action? And this is the first part in a little series we're running with Maynard, where he talks to Marlowe Cassetti. Now, Marlowe Cassetti was instrumental in the early days of NASA. I don't know where Maynard gets these people from, and he's a skeptic. Good to know. So in the first part of the interviews, we learn about the early days of NASA, and how accurate was I Dream of Jeannie? Only Maynard can ask these questions. Now, some messages just before we get into the show. Tony McCaffrey, whose daughter Dana sadly died from pertussis in 2009, has launched a petition at change.org. Whooping cough booster. Make it clear, make it easy, make it affordable. Now, I'll put a link to the show notes, but if you go to change.org and search for whooping cough booster, you'll see that petition, and I certainly urge you to support that. And just before we dive into the Skeptic Zone, don't forget the Australian Skeptics National Convention is coming up the 22nd to the 24th of November. The website to run to straight away is nationalskepticsconvention.org. And don't forget, we'll be announcing the winner of the Australian Skeptics Bent Spoon Award. The National Convention in Canberra, 22nd to the 24th of November. And the Canberra people tell me there are still tickets left, but please don't delay, and it will be really great to see you there. The theme is conspiracy theories. Well, now it's time for me to run downstairs, open the fridge, get out that bottle of lemon, lime and bitters. That's quite refreshing, yes, why not? Lemon, lime and bitters tonight, folks. While I'm enjoying that, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone.
Now it's time for Dr. Rachie Reports with Dr. Rachael Dunlop.
Hello listeners and welcome to Dr. Rachie Reports. Well, a few Thursdays ago, chiropractors in Australia copped a bollocking on the National Science Program Catalyst as Dr. Marianne de Macy turned a spotlight on their profession. And the wash-up wasn't pretty. What resulted was examples of quackery, infighting between professional bodies, and the revelation that chiropractic does not have an adverse events reporting system in Australia. Now, I want to emphasise that point because you can often hear the cry from chiropractors that their profession is overwhelmingly safe compared to science-based medicine. And this is usually followed by some straw man about the numbers of iatrogenic deaths in science-based medicine. But how do they know their profession is safe if they don't record adverse events or side effects? Well, to be blunt, they don't. Even before the program aired a few Thursdays ago, many chiropractors had hit the Catalyst Facebook page in a pre-program show of support. And this perhaps may be a result of an email that had been sent by the Chiropractic Association of Australia to all their members, warning them about the impending criticism. I decided to jump in too because I had a burning question that had been bugging me for weeks. It concerns the vaccination status of paediatric chiropractors and occurred to me when I saw some pictures of chiropractors leaning over very young children to adjust them or whatever it is they do. Now, this worries me for several reasons. Number one, Australia has been in the grips of a pertussis epidemic and kids have died. Number two, it's thought that it is adults who are passing on the bacteria because their vaccination status for pertussis has worn off. Now, the vaccine only lasts between about 4 and 8 years, so adults need to get boosters. Number three, kids under the age of 6 months are most likely to suffer and die from infection with pertussis, given that they are not fully vaccinated and thus are not protected. Also, by way of background, there are two professional bodies for chiropractors in Australia. The Chiropractic Association of Australia, who I just mentioned before, had no policy on vaccination, but published one of sorts in May 2013. And in my opinion, it's pretty wishy-washy. It simply says, chiropractors do not provide vaccination services. Chiropractors should encourage their patients to make informed healthcare decisions and to consult their GP in relation to the risks and benefits of vaccination. The other professional body for chiropractors in Australia is the Chiropractic and Osteopathic College of Australia, or COCA, who are quite clear about their stance on vaccination. They say, COCA endorses the Government of Australia's policy and position on immunisation as a simple, safe and effective way of protecting people against harmful diseases. So with this in mind, I had a burning question for paediatric chiropractors concerning duty of care for babies and what steps they take to ensure that they're protected during manipulation of babies and children. I ask this because my guess is if chiros themselves are anti-vaccination, then it seems unlikely that they will be diligent about getting boosters for things like pertussis. And I could be wrong, and I hope I am. Now, well known to regular listeners is the anti-vaccine paediatric chiropractor Nimrod Weiner, who has published several pictures of himself leaning over babies while adjusting them on his Facebook page. Now, Nimrod Weiner declined to comment on the Catalyst episode, even though a complaint made about his anti-vaccine material was mentioned during the show. So I started off by commenting on a post made by Dr. Tony Croak, chiropractor, who says on his website that he is skilled in cranial adjusting techniques, which are often very helpful for babies and children. He has also previously been a professional member of the AVN He's on the national board of the Chiropractic Association, who also approved a continuing professional development course by the notorious anti-vaccine chiropractor Tim O'Shea. On a thread that Tony started on the Catalyst page, I commented with the following. Hi Tony, thanks for commenting here. There's a question that has been posed by myself and others on this page several times now, since yesterday afternoon. Perhaps you can answer it. Are paediatric chiros up to date with their vaccinations, including boosters, especially for pertussis, which wears off? I ask because, as you probably know, babies are at risk of contracting pertussis from unvaccinated adults. Hence, there is good reason to be boosted for pertussis if you are around babies, especially if you are in close contact with them during manipulations. I am well aware of paediatric chiro Dr. Wiener's opinions on vaccination, having attended one of his seminars in 2010, where he spent 2 hours explaining how vaccines are at best unnecessary and at worst harmful. For this reason, I wonder if he has had a pertussis booster, and if not, isn't he and others potentially putting kids at risk? I understand you can't speak for him, just using his anti-vaccine stance as an example. When I attended his seminar, he said the best thing you can do for a baby is get them to your chiropractor as soon as possible after they leave hospital. So, what mechanisms are in place to ensure paediatric chiros do not pass on vaccine-preventable diseases? This seems of particular concern if the chiro is anti-vaccine. Does your code of conduct say anything about this? Thanks in advance. Now, this was posted on the Facebook page on the 12th of July at 22:45. When by the following day it still hadn't been answered by any chiropractors, let alone Dr. Tony Croak chiropractor, I reposted it to the top of the page. When still no chiropractors commented, another 24 hours later, my friend Annette had a go. She posted the question, can just one chiropractor answer these questions? So far no one has. Why, as a professional body, do you continue not to have an adverse events register, have no position on vaccination, have non-approved literature promoting all kinds of health matters in your rooms, allow members to do presentations to the general public with no mechanism of regulation to what is presented? Trying to present yourself as regulated is a joke while this type of practice is allowed. If you want to be taken seriously, you need transparency and regulation. This is seriously lacking. Now, eventually a chiropractor by the name of Steel Butcher jumped in with this comment. There are two professional bodies for chiropractors, COCA and CAA. COCA is pro-vaccination. Unfortunately, the CAA has no official stance. Tighter regulations would be nice, however, practice is still definitely regulated. As with many professions, politics gets in the way. So let me repeat that. As with many professions, politics gets in the way. So politics gets in the way of duty of care to babies. Babies who cannot fend for themselves and are susceptible to vaccine-preventable disease, which could so easily be prevented if the CAA had the balls to tell their paediatric chiros to get boosted. If they are not, once again, I hope I am wrong. This was my response to Steele. Politics gets in the way of being vaccinated against VPDs when you're treating babies who are either A, not vaccinated at all, or B, incompletely vaccinated. That's appalling. I would expect that nothing would get in the way of duty of care to patients, particularly when it comes to babies. Frankly, I'm appalled. Now, let me make this clear as possible. I am not accusing anyone of infecting kids with pertussis. I am seeking an answer to the question, if you're working with kids, are you considering their welfare by having a booster? On the surface, this seems like a simple question, but over 2 weeks later, it remains unanswered by any chiropractors, and not for lack of trying. So I have been to seminars given by paediatric chiropractors before. In fact, one's on the topic of vaccination, where I've listened to them tell parents to get their kids to a chiro as soon as possible after leaving hospital. Some advise within hours if possible. But at what risk? In medicine, decisions about interventions are determined based on a risk versus benefit ratio. For example, there is a risk in undergoing surgery, but if the benefit of removing a tumour or whatever the problem may be outweighs the risks, then people decide to do it. But what about the risk for paediatric chiropractic? Well, when the benefits are a bit better than placebo, but the risks include sustaining an injury or, worse, a vaccine-preventable disease that might kill you, then it's clear. Avoid it like the plague. If you'd like to read the transcript of this week's Dr. Rachie reports or follow any of the links or make a comment, please go to skepticsbook.com, the official blog of the Skeptic Zone. And until next time, this has been Dr. Rachie Reports.
Have you heard the one about how the Illuminati, in conjunction with the US government, are hiding the existence of aliens in order to ensure the supply of helium is kept low? Or that the CIA, the militant wing of the Freemasons, are working with the Elders of Zion to take control of the population of the world through fluoridated chemtrails? Canberra Skeptics Incorporated, on behalf of the shadow government, will be massing an array of dark forces for the Australian Skeptics National Convention 2013. This convention has conspired to coincide with the 50th anniversary of the assassination of John F. Kennedy, possibly the most famous conspiracy theory of all time. If you've ever wanted to learn about the truth behind the death of JFK, what makes for a good conspiracy theory and why they are so prevalent, Canberra Skeptics invites you to attend. That is, of course, should you choose to accept it. Come to nationalskepticsconvention.org and just remember, they will be watching you.
Well, as I mentioned at the top of the show, anybody out there who's interested in getting more science on the media, especially onto the radio, should pay careful attention. On the line, I've got Rowan Coberton, who's going to tell us more about an effort, a push to get more science into the media, especially onto radio. Rowan, hello.
How are you, Richard?
I'm doing really well. I've not been back in the country too long, but it's good to be home, and it's good to talk to someone about promoting science, which at heart, I guess, is what the Skeptic Zone is all about. Tell us more and tell us what your motivations are.
Yeah, well, so the ANDINSCIENCE Campaign is really just designed to get more science in the news media and to really just get this discussion out in the open about what we think news should really be for. I mean, it grew out of a general frustration for what qualified as news. I mean, we hear so much sport, we hear about so much petty crime and unfortunately so much tragedy that I really started to question, why are we being told this? What's the news for? Why do we listen? And more importantly, with regard to science, what aren't we being told? And in my opinion, most of the time we're not hearing about science, and when we do, it's infrequently done and often not done very well.
It's one of the criticisms we hear a lot, actually, is the science is either dumbed down for a lot of people to understand, or it's made sensational, or another bugbear of mine, I must admit, is the way that media will use the word breakthrough.
And I think that's kind of really risky, because if we start training people, particularly people who are not deeply involved in science, to expect breakthroughs, but then it never materializes 5 years down the track, then when we've got our quack offering some solution right here, right now, it's very attractive, I think, and we're kind of really promoting the wrong message when talking about science if we're always talking about breakthroughs that are sensationalized and overhyped.
That's true, and it's not quite how science works. So periodically, I guess there are things we could categorize as breakthroughs, but they're pretty rare, and they only come normally after many, many years of painstaking research.
Sure, yeah, if you dig a little bit deeper, if you scratch the surface of, the 7 Minutes of Terror or the Higgs boson, there's decades of work behind that, even though it seems like a breakthrough on the surface.
Yeah, it does. I suppose people aren't too interested in the years of painstaking and methodical research. They'd rather just hear about, does this work now and what does it do, I guess.
Yeah, how does it impact my everyday life?
Yeah, and they're told whether it's true or not.
Yeah, but I think this kind of campaign's, like, what I really think it's trying to do is, what I'm really trying to do, rather, is hopefully to go some way towards solving some problems that have been long-standing in the skeptical community. I can go into a bit more detail for each of these, but I, like every other skeptic out there, lament the quality of science news reporting, but I think a bigger issue is the fact it's not done often. And I think that's one of the first issues we've got to solve. I think also with stamping out pseudoscience and misinformation, which Australian skeptics are great at. I mean, we've got the AVN on the back foot. We totally destroyed the power balance people. We need to, I think the first step we need to do is drown out misinformation and pseudoscience with actual information. And we can do that by just putting more of it into our news media. And I think there's two more things we can benefit from. I mean, false balance is a thing we're always criticizing the media for. If we had more science, the balance would not be so false. It would definitely erase any sensation that there's a false controversy. And science needs to reclaim some of the scientific words. You know, we need to own the word theory. We need to own the word energy, and we need to claw those back to have a grounded meaning.
We do. I can't agree with you more. It's quite often we have a battle on our hands just trying to tell people what the word energy means, or people use the word energy without having a clue what it means. I think, in my experience, it boils down to a lot of people think that they interchange the word energy and feeling. Like, the expression is, "Oh, I've got a bad feeling about this." They'll say, "Oh, the energies are bad," meaning the same thing. They've got a slight hiccup in their emotional state.
Yeah, I mean, I think the scientists and skeptics have won. If anyone invokes energy for any state, and someone responds with, "Oh, can that energy power a light bulb?" We've won. We've won at that point. So,
well, I mean, you might hope we have, but I don't know if you've ever had a conversation with one of these people. It goes nowhere fast, and often it'll boil down to, I'll put the question to people, what do you think energy is? And they'll often come back with, well, the universe is made out of energy. And, and it's really hard to try and bring them back around to a logical and meaningful dialogue.
Yeah, when your premise is the universe, it's kind of hard to bring it down to something digestible, isn't it?
Yeah, and how can you beat that, skeptic?
I think another thing that this campaign's really working on is, you know, because the woo practitioners, the people who really don't know who are invoking things in a false way, the signal to noise ratio is totally skewed in their favor. You know, if we had more news, more science, really pushing veridical fact out there, we could drown out, you know, the noise, the misinformation they're making, and we could really just boost the signal of science and let it ring true and clear right through the norms of society, right through our media. And I think that would also be a huge boost to just how we understand the world around us.
It would, I totally agree. It would be. I think it's a noble ambition. I think realistically, it's a long-term strategy. I mean, this is something very hard to. The media are so used to operating in the way they do, and a lot of the times is they need a story quickly, and often don't have the time to dedicate to the proper research. Or again, it's the old story where a cheap and easy story for the media many times is to simply get two opposing issues, people from two opposing sides, and put them together.
And I think that, you know, the normal skeptic, the average guy on the street who considers themselves a skeptic, kind of has it's a tricky line to tread, because in my opinion, if we were a bit more, I mean, the reporters reporting science are often not trained in science. They're not actively trying to misrepresent scientists. They're just trying to do the best they can do. But sometimes we can come out and be a bit too vitriolic, and then the news departments will respond by going, well, this is just not popular. This is creating too much controversy. Let's not do that again. I think, you know, I personally feel, and I would, you know, advocate this position to kind of be a bit more accepting, or a softer approach to criticizing bad journalism and bad science journalism. You know, if we can get more of it in there and then kind of be more accepting of more of it being there, even if it's not great, we can deal with the quality problem 6 months from now, a year from now, at some point down the track when we've kind of really got a norm happening.
Again, I think it's a very worthwhile strategy, and it's a course we should be setting. How can people help? What's the story now for the rest of us? How can we really help?
Well, you know, we've got a petition going. It's on change.org. We've actually just made the front page because we've been so popular. In the last 4 days, we've got over 1,100 signatures, and they're coming in all the time. So you can find us at change.org, or if it's easier to remember, ANDINSCIENCE.com. The links are there. Our petition statement there is our open letter to Triple J is there. And of course, we're on Twitter and Facebook, and there's some lively discussions happening in those places as well.
That's the message, folks. Also, if you go to the Skeptic Zone homepage, www.skepticzone.tv, in the show notes for this episode, we'll have links to this petition. I've signed it myself a couple of days ago and have been publicising it, so I hope in some small way the Skeptic Zone has already helped to get some attention to this website.
Absolutely.
And, well, we will check in with you, as it were, down the track and see how this petition's going and see what progress has been made.
I look forward to it, Richard.
Rowan, thanks again for your time. And, folks, there's the message. Get more science out there in the media.
Morning, Skeptopoddies. Or afternoon, evening, night, or the wee small hours. Regardless of when you're listening, hello. Dr. Willis from the Royal Institution of Australia here with the final of 3 podcasts covering the production break of A Week in Science. That vodcast will be back next week. But what's been happening this week in the wonderful world of science? Well, lots. Let's start with a confronting commentary that appeared in Nature this week that claims the global cost of a warming Arctic could be around the same size as the total global economy for 2012. Written by several international experts, the piece claims that, while most discussions about the economic implications of a warming Arctic focus on the benefits to the region, such as increased oil and gas drilling and the opening up of new shipping routes, other effects, such as the melting of permafrost, will extract a heavy toll on the planetary hip pocket. They're talking $60 trillion, folks. And also some disappointing news about the potential use of a particular kind of stem cell. US scientists are questioning the usefulness of what are known as very small embryonic-like stem cells, or VSELs. These cells can be isolated from blood or bone marrow, rather than from embryos, and thus circumventing some tricky ethical questions, and they're thought to be an alternative source of stem cells for medicine. However, this research found they're not capable of turning into different cell types, and thus will not be useful in regenerative medicine. Are you, like me, carrying a bit more weight than you ought to be? Then it's probably not a good idea for me to be reminding you. A US study has shown that weight discrimination may in fact increase the risk of becoming obese rather than motivating individuals to lose weight. 6,000 people were involved in the study in 2006 and 2010. Those who experienced weight discrimination in 2006 were more likely to remain obese in 2010 than those who hadn't. And now to bust 2 myths from Nature. Firstly, cheetahs don't abandon their hunts because they become overheated. South African researchers measured wild cheetahs, whereas previous studies only looked at captive animals, and found their body temperatures increased only after the hunt ends and only if they were successful. They also give up about 60% of their chasers. The second myth surrounds that old favourite of the skeptics, the effects, or lack thereof, of the moon on people's behaviour. A Swiss study found that a bad night's sleep could be due to the geophysical rhythms of the moon. Study participants found they had poorer sleep and diminished levels of the sleep hormone melatonin during a full moon, which the authors say is the first reliable evidence that a lunar rhythm can modulate sleep structures in humans. And let's finish off with a couple of future events that may be of interest to you. If you are interested in questions nuclear, particularly with the future of power generation in Australia, then check out the travelling roadshow of nuclear experts touring the country in August. ATSE, the Australian Academy of Technological Sciences and Engineering, is featuring a panel discussion at their annual conference. And then members of that panel will be visiting major cities to hold further discussions. Check the ATSE, that's A-T-S-E, website for details. For those of you with a more creative bent, RIOS will be running our annual Saiku competition as part of our contribution to National Science Week. Based on the Japanese haiku poetry form, saikus have a science theme, and this year, in recognition of the International Year of Statistics and the International Year of Mathematics of planet Earth, we want you to create a suitably statistically mathematical global kind of saiku. Here's my entry. When a bell curve shows a normal distribution, peace around the mean. I know, I've missed my vocation, but don't you miss yours, and find out more about our saiku competition at riaus.org.au, where you can also find more science news and more details on the stories presented here. That's it from me. Next week, back to regular programming. Dr. Willis, signing off.
Hi, I'm Finn. And I'm Rebecca, and we're the Skepticons. Skepticons is an Irish podcast by the Dublin Skeptic Society. It takes a conversational, irreverent look at science, news and skeptical topics from an Irish perspective. You can find us at www.theskepticons.com.
You will always spirit with your strong finance.
Oh, wow. That's the Wall of Fame.
It's quiet.
Who do we have here? We have got all these stars and celebrities autographed pictures on the wall here at this restaurant in Los Angeles, where I'm having dinner with Ben Radford. Hello, Ben.
Hello there, Richard. How are you?
I'm doing really well. I've had a great time here with members of the IIG, the local skeptical group. We've had a big Italian dinner, and we're just wandering down the Wall of Fame here, because this is Hollywood, isn't it?
It is. It's Hollywood. There's stars everywhere. I was on the way in the door. I stepped over a gold bar. I'm pretty sure it was pure solid gold, because this is Hollywood. It was remarkable.
You might be right. Anyway, there's lots of faces on the wall here, photographs here. Oh, what? Frank Sinatra? Kidding me? Really?
No, that is Frank Sinatra. There's, to be honest, most of the people here are people I've never, ever heard of.
You know what? You're right. I can't recognize many people, but still the wall's smothered with celebrity photographs. Now, Ben, what have some of your latest skeptical investigations / adventures been
Adventures.
About? Adventures.
Well, the most recent thing I've done was I did an article for Skeptical Inquirer magazine on plagiarism in a vampire encyclopedia by HarperCollins.
Plagiarism in a vampire encyclopedia.
Yes. So
it almost sounds like the wind-up for a joke. Hey, thank you for coming. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
My pleasure.
Bye.
Bye now.
Cheers. Yeah, so I did I was doing some research, and I discovered some rampant plagiarism in a reference book by a multiple-time author of HarperCollins, the world's biggest publisher. And I contacted them, and I said, you should be aware that most of this book was written by other people. So that's my most recent thing. I've actually gotten very good response from readers, because it's very it's not just sort of another Bigfoot. It's not another ghost story. It's sort of like more Consumer Reports. It's like, hey, investigative journalism stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm working on that, and then I've got another book coming out.
Have you?
I have. Oh. It's called Mysterious New Mexico.
Mysterious New Mexico. I haven't been to New Mexico.
Well, I live there. You should come out sometime.
You do live there,
it's
don't
quite
you?
nice.
Yeah.
There's the deserts and all sorts of things like that.
Yeah.
And, because it'll be my 7th book.
Wow.
It'll be my 7th book. And basically I realized that I had done investigations in a lot of parts of the world, Europe, South America, elsewhere. But I hadn't really done too many or written them up in my backyard in New Mexico. And so I figured, well, why not? I mean, New Mexico's a weird place. I live there. That'll tell you something.
Is that where they make Breaking Bad?
Yes, that's exactly what they do with Breaking Bad.
Yes.
So in addition, we have monsters and miracles and weird things like that, and so lots of ghost stories. So that'll be coming out next year from University of New Mexico Press.
Excellent. And do you still get feedback, reaction from the Chupacabra?
I do, actually.
Yeah.
It's the Chupacabra book I did came out, I think, in 2010 or so.
Chasing Chupacabra.
Tracking the Chupacabra.
Tracking the
Chupacabra. Yeah, it's interesting. That's sort of, it's probably one of my highest profile investigations so far. Because it's just so widely known. It's known all around the world. And it was funny the other day. I was thinking about when someone writes my obituary, what are they going to be talking about? And someone, when they say, among my accomplishments, however few or many it is, it's going to be, and by the way, he solved this mystery of this weird vampire beast, Chupacabra.
Yeah.
And it was just sort of interesting, and I'm okay. I mean, I'm happy with that, I guess. It's just sort of an unusual thing. So it was kind of,
I think on my gravestone there's going to be chiseled in a power balance bracelet.
Oh, yeah. Well, you did amazing work on the power balance stuff. I mean, yeah. And
it's good fun. I'm wearing 3 of them as we speak from the amazing meeting. It's good fun. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, you've done so much. I mean, this is the problem with trying to what does Richard Saunders do? It's like, what doesn't he do? So there's and that's one of the great things is that you're really a jack of all trades. There's so much.
Well, we all have to be, don't we? To a respect. Yeah. I mean, skeptics we should specialize, I guess, but there is so much to skepticism, isn't there? I mean, on the Australian Skeptics website, I remember there's a page, I think it's still there, which is an A to Z, and it starts with abracadabra and ends with zombies, and everything in between.
Right.
It's ridiculously a number of topics in skepticism.
Right. Yeah. There's it's such fertile ground. I mean, that's the thing is that there's almost no area of human interest or endeavor that doesn't have some woo-woo in it.
That's true.
With psychology, physics, geography, geology, medicine. Take your pick. I mean, there's really nothing that isn't contaminated in some way by pseudoscience or bullshit. And in some ways, it's sort of an overwhelming job because there's so much out there. But that's what makes it challenging. That's what makes it fun.
Would you believe it that Brian Dunning is making faces at us through the look at this? He's doing puppy dog faces at us.
Oh, he's so adorable.
Come on, then, let him in. No, he doesn't want to. Come on.
Throw him a little bone.
Is live interview, folks. This is what happens. Here he comes.
Is that Brian Dunning?
He's looking sheepish.
Brian Dunning? I don't see that weird sour.
Do you know any of these celebrities on the wall?
Yeah.
Apart from Frank Sinatra.
Other than him.
Well, of course I recognize my own picture up there.
I recognize. That's Michael Jackson.
The novellas. There's Steve Novella. There's Jay Novella.
How about that? Look at Steve Novella.
I didn't see that.
Wow.
I think there's
Lonnie Anderson. Very nice.
There's
Brian Dunning dressed up as Lonnie Anderson.
That's what it is. I thought I recognized that false lipstick. That's right.
Yeah. That's
Ben and I were just discussing how many topics there are in skepticism. Everything from A to Z, right?
Yeah, I think there's up to about 35 by now.
At least.
Yeah.
At least 35 things in skepticism.
I've had to do 10 episodes on every subject.
Just because you had to just repeat them.
Yes. And each time I just kind of juice it up a little, add some spice, kind of come up with some creative additions to the story. Keep the legend growing, That's
add
what we're all about.
Take out a few facts, throw in some bullshit. It's all good.
Yeah, and I found a great new wealth in just inventing old newspaper articles. Find an old newspaper, claim that the November 1913 issue had a particular article. You can give the writer a name. It's amazing, and you can cite anything.
But you know what happens? And Ben Radford gets those and thinks they're real. You're going to have to rewrite your books, Ben.
I've wasted so much time tracking down Brian's stories from 1913 newspapers. And so as he quoted here, and I'm like, hold on, there was no Charleston Observer.
Have you done Chupacabra on Skeptoid?
No, that's something that I don't think has really merited a skeptical treatment, so I haven't... No, there's 2 episodes.
Someone's going to get kicked in the nuts.
I haven't done Chupacabra, obviously, because that's Ben's specialty, and I haven't done the moon hoax because that's Phil Plate's specialty. And I think eventually I'm just going to do kind of watered down episodes. Of both of those.
You could with yes, it is. Ben's done that, and Phil's done the moon hoax, but there's still topics to be covered. There's other aspects to it. Or you could do one just about Ben.
Right. What can I say?
Well, the reason I mentioned the fake newspaper articles is because that was what I ran into this week when I was researching the current Skeptoid. I won't say the name of the author, but there was a 1950s author who he basically made up a short story as a campfire tale, and then in the 70s, another author went back and tried to turn that into a real thing, and he invented newspaper articles from the early 1900s to support it, and converted a campfire story into a whole, what's become sort of an urban legend.
Oh my God, I have to read this. Where can I find it?
Listen to Skeptoid.
Skeptoid.com.
You see?
See, I set that up. It was great.
Oh, you set that up?
Yeah.
I missed that. That was very clever. That was very clever. So, I'm in the presence of some guys who have both written books. In fact, we all have. If I
Yes,
might
that's right.
say so.
That's
We've all
right.
written books. But you guys certainly have written books more recently than I have. 4 books on Skeptoid. Is it 4?
Yes, I can't say I wrote them. I kind of copy and pasted them, really.
Yeah, but from your own work. So I guess you did, right?
There's actually 6 of them that are done, but only 4 of them have made it as far as the formatting stage.
But you're telling me 7.
I've written 7 books,
Yeah.
and actually, not to brag, but I was looking at it.
Oh, brag! Go
Well,
on.
if you include books that I've either written or contributed chapters to or co-authored, it's actually 20.
Ooh.
I'm just saying.
I'm just putting it out there. Right? Just putting it out. Yeah, just in passing.
Well, it's just it's in some cases just a little minor chapter. Usually talking about Brian and his. It's like
the first real skeptical book that I bought was at the first TAM that I went to, and that was your Lake Monsters book with by Ben Radford and Joe Nickel. Right,
Well,
I've used that as reference on a couple of episodes, I think.
Well, thank you. Glad you liked it.
So what would be the ideal adventure / mystery / investigation for you? What if someone came and gave you a blank check and said, please investigate the mystery of your choice, what would it be?
Up until very recently, my answer would have been the Beast of Gévaudan, which is this mysterious thing that killed peasants in 1700s France, in southern France. And it was a very strange case. Brian knows about it. That for many years that was my sort of wish list investigation. Unfortunately, or rather fortunately, before I could get to it, another author, Jay Smith, I believe is his name, wrote an excellent, what I consider to be the definitive book solving that mystery. The book is called The Monsters of the Gévaudan. And it's a brilliant book. It's just very well done, well researched, and he basically solves the mystery. And so we actually interviewed him on our Monster Talk show, and I was kind of pleased because he actually read my Chupacabra book. So he's like, I read your book. I'm like, I read your book too. This is cool. So there was a lot of initial dicks.
Well, that avenue has been closed off.
Yes. What
would be the second one?
The second one would be... there's so many great mysteries out there.
Lost civilizations?
Yeah, I mean, maybe... I'm trying to think of something that... I try to do mysteries that haven't been done to death.
Ooh, that's pretty tough.
Well, it is. You sort of come up with new stuff, because otherwise you're just retreading the same old shit.
Yeah.
To be honest,
folks, here's your chance to write to Ben Radford.
Yeah, give me a suggestion.
Give him a suggestion.
Yeah, there's so many. Probably I would tackle some of the old ghost photos. Blake Smith and I have done that on occasion. We'll tackle some classic ghost photos. Blake did an excellent piece on what's the one with the 2 faces in the
ocean.
Yeah,
the 2 faces. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. I'm sure our listeners know that one too.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's like Sailors Lost at Sea.
Yeah, that one. Yeah, and he did a great job on that one, and he and I have collaborated on a couple other ones. So probably to answer your question is I would go back to look at some of the unsolved classic ghost photographs, Raynham Hall, things like that. There's been, not that they're totally unsolved, there's been explanations, but sometimes it's good to sort of take a fresh pair of eyes.
Now, if you had, both of you, I'll start with you, Ben, if you had a time machine and the idea was that you could go back and be like the invisible holograph, not interfering, but a witness to an event in history, what would you like to see?
I would like to see...
would it be a mystery? Would it be a famous historical event?
I would like to see Sir Richard Burton looking for the source of the Nile.
Searching for the Nile, the source of the Nile.
Yeah, the source of the Nile. I've always been a big admirer of some of the Victorian-era explorers, and Sir Richard Burton has always been a personal hero of mine.
Wow.
And just the explanation he did with John Hanning Speak and all that. So.
I thought you'd say... I'd want to be there on the grassy knoll.
No. Honestly, I think it all ties in with me because the common thread to me is exploration and the gaining of knowledge. And so whether it's like a conspiracy thing or just, learning something that nobody's figured out before. So that's probably what I would do.
And what about you, Mr. Dunning?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned the grassy knoll because, I jumped to thinking, what are some of these great sort of skeptical mysteries? The skeptical topics. And the thing is that nothing really happened at any of those. It's like if you go to a hotel that's supposed to be haunted with your video camera, what are you going to get video of? Nothing.
Yeah.
So I think what something that's always fascinated me that I know is a real event that I'd like to see was in the very early days of the formation of the Earth. And I think we're talking about somewhere about halfway through its history, when the tides were at their highest, when the moon was at its closest, orbiting the fastest, and we had oceans, and the tides were the highest that they've ever been. And I've heard varying reports that these tides might have been in the hundreds of feet, possibly even thousands of feet, huge walls of whitewater crashing across continents and things. And I'd like to see whatever the height of that actually was and see what that actually looked like for real.
Well, if Brian's going to come up with that good an answer, then I'm going to change mine. Mine,
Tunguska. How about Tunguska?
No. I would want to be there for the 1967 Patterson-Gimlin Bigfoot film.
Yeah.
I want to be there when Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin get off their horses in Bluff Creek, California.
Zip up the suit. And
I just want to sit there in the back and say, all right, let's see. Who's in the suit? What does he do? So that would be my answer. I want to be there for the 1967 Patterson Gimlin Bigfoot film just because it's so controversial and
still, isn't it?
To this day, and it's pretty clearly a hoax.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things where nailing the conclusive evidence for it is so difficult because it's been so long and so that would be my other answer. Would be I'd want to be there just to sit back and just see this whole thing unfold.
Say right,
You know what I love about that answer is because I've said this before, so I don't care if I sound if it sounds embarrassing.
Brian, just to be clear, Brian has never been afraid to embarrass himself. That's one thing that I appreciate about him.
I've always said that the Patterson-Gimlin Bigfoot film looks very real, and I think the historical evidence is clear that it's a hoax.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any question about that. But I think it's one of the most brilliantly effective hoaxes ever, because to me that looks like a real animal.
Yeah, you have inverse correlation between the quality of the film and how convincing it is. You see the same thing with UFO videos, where the clearer it is, the more obvious it is not a UFO.
Well, there you go. Now, folks at home, what would you go back? If you had a time machine and you could witness something, would you go back to Israel and see a certain young magician learn his trade, I wonder? Would that be the way to do it? Would you go and see one of Harry Houdini's acts? I would.
Yeah,
that would be something.
That's another good thing.
Even though that's not strictly...
No, but
it's part of our history.
Yeah, absolutely.
It'd be really great to see.
And I would love to be in one of those seance rooms when Houdini busts us.
Oh yeah, that would be good.
Just sit there and just watch the master magician
nail it.
Zero in on these cheap tricks. And bust
them. That would be so great. Or maybe our listeners would like to come here and join us for this dinner we're having tonight, because when they hear this will be in the past.
Yes, that's true.
I don't see any, but I'm sure they're here in spirit. Ben Radford, thank you. Brian Dunning, thank you. Why don't we join the rest of our party and finish off our dinner?
Let's do so.
Let's do it.
It never ends. A friend starts talking about his new Reiki master, and someone else just posted about another all-natural cancer cure that they don't want you to know about. As skeptics, we spend a lot of time trying to educate and protect those around us, but there is a way that you can reach millions. Guerrilla Skepticism on Wikipedia is a group working to keep the best skeptical information at everyone's fingertips. Join us. We need writers, editors, translators. We need you. To join us or find out more, send a Facebook friend request to Susan Gerbic. That's Gerbic. Guerrilla Skepticism. The time is now.
Here's Maynard's spooky action at a distance.
On the phone, I have someone who contacted me saying, "Hey, Maynard, you must be into aeronautics, and you're certainly into aeronautics, aren't you, Marlowe?"
Yes, I am.
And why did you contact me in the first place?
Well, I'm interested in aeronautics. I was in the space program for the majority of my career, and I'm a skeptic.
You certainly are. In fact, you're really into helping retired people expand their critical thinking skills. Is that what you're into?
Yes, I am, and but also to young people as well.
And Marlowe, actually, how long were you at NASA, and what were you involved in? I believe you were involved in Apollo?
Yes. Well, actually, I date back to the original manned in space program, Project Mercury.
Mercury? That means you're also involved in Gemini as well.
Yes, I was had major responsibilities in Gemini.
Was it exactly like Larry Hagman in I Dream of Jeannie? Is that exactly what it was like at NASA during that time?
I don't think so. I think that was a total misrepresentation. Starting off with, we had a number of military officers working with us. The original 7 Mercury astronauts were all military officers. I never saw them once in their military uniforms.
Was the culture of being an astronaut a little bit like the Larry Hagman thing in that they had the big convertible car and they were very, very extroverted people?
Yes, that part is a pretty good representation of the original astronauts, and plus the second group and further.
Because I imagine it would have been a very technically intense time, but was it a relaxed culture, or was it a fairly regimented culture because you really had this important job to do and you were on the edge of engineering at that time?
I think it was more the latter, because we were in a head-to-head race with the Soviet Union, and you also have to remember the culture in the 50s and 60s was difficult time engineering-wise with the arms race. Yeah, there was some relaxed culture, but it was a pretty intense time.
I guess it is easy to forget this distance from the Cold War, what the threat was thought to be at the time. And what area were you working in at NASA, Marlowe?
Well, I started off actually with the predecessor to NASA, an organization called NACA, National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics. NACA, if you know anybody in aviation, NACA was the premier aeronautical research organization. And then after the launch of Spooking, which happened in President Eisenhower's administration, he enacted something called the National Space Act in the United States, which formed NASA, and the organization that I was working for, NACA in Virginia, became the core group for NASA and manned spaceflight.
Of course, a great deal is made about how America felt when Sputnik was launched. Was there a feeling of shame or a feeling of we've really got to catch up fast? What was the exact emotion?
I think it was some of that and also terror. We always thought the Soviet Union was behind us in terms of technological superiority. Launching Sputnik was not only a psychological downer for us, but it really showed the rest of the world, the developing world, that, hey, maybe the communist system of government is better than the capitalist.
And as far as critical thinking goes and skepticism, do you think that goes hand in hand with being an engineer and to have that training? Or do you think engineers still have that little bit of luck and a bit of cross your fingers kind of thing that goes on with some things? There is a little bit of woo that can creep in from time to time, do you think?
I never saw woo happening, and I'll give you ask you the question: would you get on an airplane, say a commercial airliner, that wasn't designed and developed using critical, well-researched engineering principles, or would you want to have something that has the psychic hotline involved in it?
That's a very good question, Marlowe. And the answer is, I don't think so.
Right.
And with all the projects you were involved in, of course, you mentioned Mercury, and then there was Gemini and Apollo. Just recently, I seem to have been very fascinated with the Apollo 7 mission, which was the last one around the Earth, where they were testing a lot of things before Apollo 8 went and circuited the moon. And I found that mission very interesting because two of the astronauts on that during their few days that they were up there got very snippy with master control and were never used as astronauts again. And I think they learned a lot in that mission, and that mission tends to be forgotten.
That's a good point you're making. There's another thing that we learned. We ran into a medical problem that we never had before in Mercury and Gemini, is that Mercury was a tiny, tiny capsule that you had to shoehorn the astronaut in. Gemini was not really much better. It was able to hold two astronauts, but they too were in rather cramped space. But in Apollo, you've got this spacious, big spaceship, and lo and behold, we found out that they had something they called SAS, Space Adaptation Syndrome, which is the same thing as seasickness.
Now, is this particularly because the inner ear, because it's got all this area to roam around in it, it can't work out what's up and down, and that causes a confusion?
I believe that is one of the ideas that they've come to. But again, I don't think the science has really been well investigated. But it seemed like we didn't have this problem for many hours of space flight on the two previous programs. But Apollo, especially Apollo 7 and somewhat on Apollo 8. And the other thing that gets confused in all this is the astronauts really want to believe they're superhuman. And so when they start getting ill or airsick or whatever you want, seasick, they're not too forthcoming and saying, "Hey guys, I'm sick today. Don't have me do anything."
This is typical of test pilots and astronauts. Do you think by drawing from scientists rather than test pilots, and a few of the astronauts that went to the moon were actual scientists rather than that, it's a different type of person, you get a different result?
Well, no, I don't think that's been our experience. For example, the worst case of this was on the Apollo mission that Rusty Schweikert flew. He got violently ill. He was basically out of commission for over a day, and he was just really terrible sickness, and it was from vertigo-like sensation, inner ear, and so forth.
And was that because he didn't have a background as a pilot as much? Was that what it was?
I don't know whether we can attribute that to his problem or not. I was not really in the aero medicine, just sitting in meetings and being concerned about it for the flight operations part of it.
Yes. What actual area of the program were you working in?
Okay, I started off in Mercury, being assigned to the Atlas launch vehicle that was pushing them into Earth orbit. I did the calculations on the performance of the Atlas versus pushing up the spacecraft weight into orbit. And it really becomes quite a probability game. And I would brief the crews and management before each Mercury flight. Also, we would give, I was sort of the liaison between ourselves and NASA and the Air Force, who had the Atlas rocket. So they were responsible for that, and I was responsible for tying it all together. And I was in my 20s when all this was going on.
That must have been so exciting.
It was. Indeed it was. Really was. In amongst all this, the announcement of by President Kennedy that we were going to the moon was another excitement on top of it. And I found out after I had transferred over from the aeronautics side to the space side that we were going to go to a new space center.
Wow.
And
I have to ask you something, Marlowe Cassetti, with your experience at NASA. When President Kennedy made that announcement, I've watched that piece of footage a number of times. We've all seen it on various, and he made that speech more than once. There is one that he fairly public speech, and if you look behind him and just to the right, there's Vice President Johnson. And Johnson's got his hand against the side of his head, and you can almost see him saying, "Here we go again. Jack's coming up with one of these weird plans." He's got that look on his face like, what is he getting us into? And I urge people to have a look at that. Whenever you see Kennedy giving the speech, just to the right, have a look at Johnson. He looks like, oh boy, this is going to cost a lot of money.
Well, the interesting thing about that, I know the footage you're talking about, and I've gotten a laugh out of that too. But from all accounts of the Kennedy administration, Vice President Johnson was kind of shuffled off to the side. He wasn't involved in the Bay of Pigs fiasco or the Cuban Missile Crisis and so forth and so on. But he was appointed by President Kennedy to be head of the President's Space Council. So when the decision to go to a new space center, to build a brand new space center to handle the Apollo program and all the missions leading up to that, all the programs leading up to it, he was presented with the top three candidates. Number one was Berkeley, California. Number two was Tampa, Florida. And number three was Houston, Texas. Now, this is rumored. I can't tell you this is what really happened, but when the site selection committee briefed him on their recommendations, he looked at the leader of the group and said, "Where in Texas is Berkeley, Texas?" And of course, there's no such thing as Berkeley, Texas, so he went down the list and picked Houston.
Well, he was a proud Texan oil man.
He was indeed a shrewd politician. We've probably never had as good a political expert as Lyndon Johnson for president. He could work with Congress and the Supreme Court and everything else like an expert. He could play them like a fiddle.
Yeah, I enjoy hearing those White House tapes that have since been released of his conversations, but with the Kennedys and with some of the civil rights people, and he also had a reputation of being a bit blue at some of the press conferences he did as well.
You bet. He was your typical Texan, and people don't. You got to live in Texas for 26 years, like I did, to really appreciate what Texas is all about.
Hey, Kenny.
Oh, hi, Tom.
Nice day at this park, yeah?
Yes, great weather.
Oh, look, a unicorn.
Unicorn? There are no such things as unicorns, silly.
Yes, there is.
No, there isn't.
Hey, guys, what are you arguing about?
Tom thinks unicorns are real.
They so are.
Let's look this up in the Skeptic's Dictionary.
The what?
How can we do this in this park? There is no computer here.
You guys probably don't know about the Skeptic's Dictionary app. Available now for iPhone, iPad, and iPod Touch in the App Store.
Wow, cool.
The app lets you access all of the great Skeptic's Dictionary articles when you're on the go. Here, let me look up unicorns.
Oh, cool. Kenny, prepare to be proven wrong.
It says here, the unicorn is a creature from fables.
Aha!
Actually, I see now that someone just dumped their ice cream cone on that horse's head. Thanks, Skeptic's Dictionary iPhone app.
Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone, and what a mixed bag the Skeptic Zone was today. That's one of the things I like about the Skeptic Zone. You never know what you're going to get. I never know what you're going to get week to week. It's a bit of a surprise to me. But I can tell you one thing, coming up in the next few weeks, more interviews from the amazing meeting, more information about the upcoming Australian Skeptics National Convention, more Maynard, more Dr. Rachie. What more could you want? And again, thank you to all those people who came up to say hello to me and Joe Benamu at the amazing meeting in Las Vegas. What a lot of fun that was. And thank you to the James Randi Educational Foundation, and especially to DJ Grothy. Always a pleasure to work with you, DJ. And until next week, this is Richard Saunders, signing off from Sydney, Australia.
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone. Visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for comments, contacts, and extra video reports.